Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, writers, scientists, educators, social scientists, government leaders. We speak with each one to one. What concerns New Yorkers the most? Certainly the state of the economy and the education system, the affordability of health care, and the quality and cost of transportation are all major concerns. But probably the biggest concern for most of us is how to find and keep affordable housing. Barika Williams is uniquely qualified to assess the successes and failures of the city's housing policies. She's policy director of the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, an organization that may not be a household name, but which serves an important function. Founded in 1974 by 8 nonprofit neighborhood housing groups, it now has 94 members who advocate for the housing needs of low and moderate income New Yorkers. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about your organization, who you are and what you do.
So as you said in your introduction, ANHD really came out of the community development movement in New York City in the 60s and 70s. We were created as a trade association to serve and serve in service to our members across the city by those original founding groups. And we really serve almost 100 members now of CDCs, locally based nonprofits that work on housing issues across the city in all 5 boroughs. Everything from affordable housing development, tenants' rights, organizing, bank reinvestment, whether banks are investing back into their local communities where they're doing banking services. So really a broad array of issues that impact communities at the local level.
Now, Mayor Bloomberg gets vilified for allegedly having sold New York City down the river to the big developers. And yet, your own recent study of the mayor's affordable housing program concludes that he has created more affordable housing units than any other mayor in history. Is that true?
So, the mayor's new housing marketplace plan, which was was Mayor Bloomberg's big affordable housing plan, will, in all likelihood, hit its mark of creating 165,000 units of affordable housing.
By when?
By the end of his term.
Okay.
Both new construction and preservation. It is the biggest size investment that we've seen. Really, the first of these plans came under Mayor Koch, which was about 100,000 units in Koch's plan. It's a little bit challenging to think about the scale. It's a big number. 165,000 units feels like a very big number, and in many regards, New York City is lucky because throughout the various different mayors since Koch, we really have always had mayors who still maintained a commitment to affordable housing development. Everybody has pretty much kept with Koch's original investment.
Koch is the one who gets the credit. He had a 10-year plan, created how many affordable units?
100,000 units.
And they really were affordable. They were in the city buildings that the city had taken over for non-payment of taxes. Exactly. Sometimes buildings that had fallen into disrepair, and they were renovated, and the rents were actually affordable, correct?
Well, everyone is sort of using the same program in a little ways, and the same government programs, the same template, but we had a very different city than really we have now, and that's one of the challenges. So what was affordable to a clustered together, heavily middle-class base New York City is very different than what we say is affordable to a New York City that has very few people who make a huge amount of money, and then a lot of New York, most of New York, who is down around low and moderate income.
Right. So why am I stunned by the rental prices that I hear quoted for apartments in the city? Is there an average rental price for Brooklyn or Manhattan or?
It changes from quarter to quarter. I think the last I remember hearing for parts of Manhattan was about $2,200 for a
one-bedroom apartment. Okay.
But that could be a little out of date, and it ebbs and flows. But that's not far off the mark in Manhattan.
So we know that Manhattan is not affordable for most people. And Brooklyn has gotten to be not affordable for
And largely a lot of New York is getting to be not affordable to most New Yorkers. That's really the challenge, and that's what ANHD really talks about in the Real Affordability Report is what is really affordable? What
now,
are we saying?
what neighborhoods are still affordable? The Bronx, I would think.
The parts of the Bronx, though there are certain neighborhoods in the Bronx that are starting to feel the pressures of Upper Manhattan.
Queens, some areas of Queens.
Some areas of Queens, some areas of outer Brooklyn. But we're kind of in this constant step where as a neighborhood becomes less and less affordable, the people who were there who had a stable, affordable housing unit can no longer afford it. They move to the next neighborhood out. Somebody else moves to the next neighborhood out. And so you kind of have this constant pressure of stepping out piece by piece.
How about the Lower East Side?
The Lower East Side is, I mean, it's starting to really feel the pressures of the neighborhoods around it. Chinatown is going to be more than likely going through a big rezoning. And we also have some development plans that are happening for the Lower East Side, also South Street Seaport. So we're really looking at the Lower East Side potentially starting to become more and more unaffordable when it used to be long thought of as a great affordable housing neighborhood.
Is anybody actually building low and moderate priced housing in the city anymore? I mean, I know that there are these, you know, you talk about the urban development corporations. I mean, there's one in Harlem, there used to be some in the Bronx, probably some in Brooklyn. Is anybody, I'm talking about low cost housing, is anybody building in it anymore?
So many of ANHD members are. So our local nonprofit CDCs build low income housing. And one of the challenges is building in New York is expensive and land in New York is expensive. So it's extremely difficult to build truly low cost housing that's affordable for the neighborhood. You have areas in the Bronx where the median income is $20,000.
Right.
That's hard to build for.
So how do they manage to do it?
Right now it's the existing stock. The existing housing stock is largely what's affordable. A lot of our affordable housing is in the older housing stock that still has reasonable pricing, and then the new affordable housing stock that's being built largely by CDCs, by the community development field, and by affordable housing developers.
My understanding is that most of the so-called moderate priced housing, I'm not even talking about, and maybe low income, but I suspect not, is built by builders of basically luxury apartment buildings who, in return for tax breaks, set aside a small number of apartments in those buildings for people with moderate incomes. Is that basically how it's done in most cases?
For some of the city's affordable housing, definitely. So we have programs like 421A and the 80/20 program where developers get a tax abatement or they get access to subsidies for building a small share of affordable housing units in a larger luxury building. ANHD has pushed and is leading the charge for the city to really take the next step and put in place a guaranteed inclusionary zoning policy, which would be to say, for all developers in the city, when you build a big market rate building and you're getting a rezoning, you're getting all of this extra space that the city now all of a sudden says you can build for, you have to build some affordable housing.
Regardless of whether you get a special tax rebate.
Regardless.
Okay.
You're getting extra space.
Right.
The neighborhood needs something back as well.
Okay, okay. What's the usual set aside in a building? Is it about 20% or what?
It's about 20%.
Okay. And usually the income limits for those 20% are very narrow. You know, it's like if you can't make less than 37.5 or more than 57.10. You know, so how do people even know that housing is available? How do you find out?
So both the CDCs and HPD, the Housing Preservation Development for the city's agency, have housing lotteries where they advertise that these are coming up, but you really have to know that that's where you've got to go and look for things.
Right.
Our groups try to market and let their community know, hey, we have something up, we have a lottery, we've just finished a building, but you've got to, I mean, I'm sure you know and you've seen that when a building gets completed, you've got a huge influx of people who are looking to be a part of that lottery, and
right.
if you're lucky enough to
So you have to go to the agency and find out.
You can apply online, but it's either being a part of a listserv or knowing and being involved in your local community groups and knowing that something is available.
And those lower rentals are not permanent, right? Usually.
Some of them are and some of them aren't. So I mean, one of the big benefits of the community development sector and the nonprofit sector is we build permanently affordable housing. We find ways to continue to make it affordable because we really can't, we believe not just in the housing program, but in the value it brings to the neighborhood. We're not going to let it drop off and become market rate housing because we know what a big pressure that is both for the neighborhood, but also for our residents and
Right.
for our community. A lot of some of the other housing in New York and some of the other affordable housing that's being built with these tax abatements and with city subsidy dollars expire after 30 years.
Okay. So the people who are in those units, they can stay.
Right.
But in terms of people moving in, you're talking about market rate apartments. Right.
And we're talking about a huge number. So we're looking at potentially the Koch era housing that you were talking about is going to start to expire in about 2017. And we're going to be looking at losing, on average, about 11,000 affordable units a year.
Wow. According to your recent study called Real Affordability, which takes a look at the Bloomberg program, among the pluses of that program is that most of those affordable units built have gone to the communities that needed it most. I mean, to Central Harlem, Chinatown, the Lower East Side, East Harlem, Chelsea, Clinton, Mott Haven in the Bronx, Northeast Brooklyn. It's you know, the largest number have gone to the neighborhoods that needed it most.
In terms of location.
Right, right. And that mayor's program has built a wide range of apartment sizes, about half of them for single people or couples and about half family size apartments. So those are two good things about that program. But you say that a major problem is that 2/3 of these units that have been created are too expensive for most of the residents of those neighborhoods.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of the affordable housing that's coming online for any given neighborhood is priced higher than most of the local residents in the neighborhood.
So how did that happen? Did anybody know that when they were building them?
It's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge for New York City. It's a huge challenge for local residents. It's a huge challenge for our CDCs. Part of it is federal programs and guidelines and the way we calculate things, but part of it is also what we set as our goals and our priorities. And is our goals as a city to build an affordable housing unit? Check. And it's not as important whether the affordable housing unit is for somebody making $120,000 or somebody making $40,000. Or are we really going to take a step back and say, what is really the value of this affordable housing? Who do we really want this for? How do we want this to serve our community? And then build the housing to meet those needs.
We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back in a moment with Barika Williams, Policy Director of the Association of Neighborhood and Housing Development, right after this. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Barika Williams, Policy Director of the Association of Neighborhood and Housing Development. So when a builder is proposing to build several luxury buildings in a neighborhood, and he's saying, I'm going to set aside, so many units in each building, and these are what the rents are going to be, does anybody say, no, your rents have to be lower because that neighborhood needs lower rents than that? Does anybody, before they give him the tax abatement?
So our groups do, and the community does. Oftentimes we see the community saying, we want this, we're looking for this affordability level. But one of the challenges is the programs that they're accessing, these subsidy programs, set that level. So in affordable housing speak, it's AMI, area median income, and everything is anchored off of, is it 60% AMI or is it 80% AMI? And that's a difference between whether you qualify at $50,000 or whether you would have to make $72,000 to qualify.
And somebody else sets that level.
And HUD sets that level.
Okay. It was interesting, your report said that the average size household in New York City, the income is $48,700, that over half of New York City households are low-income households.
Right. So it's one of the big challenges for affordable housing and for New York in general when it comes to the press, when it comes to our politicians talking about this, is when they go out, they say, I'm going to build middle-income housing. And we as residents think, that's great, that's me, that's my friend, that's my neighbor, that's my cousin. But in reality, in terms of income, in terms of the way the affordable housing speak works, most of New Yorkers are low and moderate income. they would qualify for low and moderate income housing. That's 75% of New York. That's a huge amount of the city's population.
So how do you force developers to offer apartments at truly affordable rents? How do you get them to do that?
And this goes back to the guaranteed inclusionary zoning. This is really something that the next mayor absolutely needs to put in place. We are diminishing in terms of land and opportunities where to build. We've had, under Mayor Bloomberg, we've had huge parts of the city rezoned. Long Island City, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, right? We see a lot of these big development changes happening across the city. And as they happen, as this growth in the city happens, there has to be space for affordable housing in that growth. And it can't be a fight by fight, community by community, knock down, drag out every single time. It should just be a part of building and growth in the city, that there's affordable housing set aside for the community at an appropriate level that's really affordable for residents every single time.
Was that something that Bloomberg was against?
In 2005, the city put in place a voluntary inclusionary zoning policy. They were under negotiations and conversation, were really just not willing to take the additional step for a guaranteed inclusionary zoning policy, and we just haven't seen that work. The city's created about 2,700 affordable housing units under inclusionary zoning, which constitutes about 2% of all of the new development in the city. It's a very, very small share. So you can think about the difference if that number was 20% instead of 2%, and the impact that would have had.
Your organization has come up with a real affordability index. How would that work?
So the Real Affordability Index is a proposal and is an idea and a way to really start a conversation and say, maybe we should be measuring this differently. Instead of just measuring a unit as a unit and not really thinking as much about, is it serving somebody who is making $100,000, or is it serving a family of 5 who is making $60,000? And is it a building that includes a community space, or is it just a building of apartments that really isn't looking at and working and filling a need in the community? And so the Real Affordability Index is an idea to say, let's start to think about and analyze and set our priorities and our goals for affordable housing development and how we develop units and what we count as a unit very differently.
So where do these half of New Yorkers who make $48,700 or less, where do they live? And what kind of rents do they pay?
They live all over, and they pay a lot more in rent than they can really afford. And this is not restricted to those New Yorkers who make that $47,000. This is most of us. This is pretty much all of New York. The federal government sets income guidelines where you should pay about 30% of your income in rent. And a lot of New York hits that number, and there's a big part of that low income population that goes up to 50%, 40 and 50%, where they're extremely rent burdened. And what you have is people who end up cutting corners and not being able to pay for healthcare costs. You've got young professionals who say, I'm going to forego my healthcare. You've got seniors who are on fixed income who are not paying for medicine. You've got parents who are thinking about, well, maybe I won't pay for this music class because I have to make rent. And people are just making those very, very tough choices.
It's been a long time since there were any developments. I'm talking about like the old Mitchell-Lama buildings, or like the former, well, not former, but Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper Village. I think Lenox Terrace in Harlem is probably one of those, maybe even Park West Village on the Upper West Side, that were developments that were meant for, middle income people. My sense is nobody has built anything like that in a long time.
That's absolutely correct.
The federal government is out of that business, right?
Yes, the federal government is largely out of that business, and it's I think one of the challenges is that it's really not a business that anybody else has stepped into, and we've got a lot of development and a lot of growth happening in the city, and most of that development and growth is happening for a population who isn't here and who can afford all of that luxury development that we see going up everywhere. and not for the bulk of New Yorkers who live here, who
Well,
go through
who are
day to
they?
day.
Who are these people who can pay, you know, $5,000 a month for an apartment? I mean,
I'd like to know too.
I don't. This is the 1%? Where are they from? Who are they?
Some of it is foreign investors who come in and know that New York is a great real estate investment. Some of it is really high income people from other parts of the country who are paying for apartments here. But it really creates the picture of, you don't know them, I don't know them, a lot of New Yorkers don't know them. And so the question is, who's all this development for? Because if none of us really know these folks, is this development for New Yorkers, or is it for a new population coming in?
Right.
And everybody understands the city's going to grow. Everybody wants to be a part of that growth. But if that growth happens without any of the New Yorkers, the current residents, the people who have been here for decades and really invested in the city over time, having a space and a place in that, that's really the challenge.
Now, the federal government still has Section 8, which is a subsidy for, is it low income or middle income? Lower income?
Lower income.
But that's been cut. The budget for that has been cut, hasn't it?
Yes, the budget for Section 8 has been cut back drastically over time. Section 8 caps the amount of money that you can pay in rent. So Section 8 will subsidize what you can pay, but everything above that 30% of your income level. But it's hard. I mean, it's a hard exchange to say, for somebody to go out and use their Section 8 voucher in a unit that costs $22,000, that's a lot of money for the city to subsidize, for the federal government to subsidize month to month, year to year, over time.
Right. Are there any new Section 8 vouchers, or are they all taken?
There's a new crop of Section 8 vouchers that tend to come up every single year, though as HUD's budget gets cut, that number also gets cut. As part of sequestration, there was a cut in some of the Section 8 vouchers, and the city HPD managed to deal with it by sort of letting the attrition of current Section 8 vouchers expire, and hopefully they managed to not take anybody's Section 8 voucher away, which is a very, very big accomplishment.
Right.
But it is hard because there's a lot of people who could use something like that, and there's just really...
Is there a waiting list for them?
There are. There's a waiting list for... I'm not sure for Section 8. I know similarly for public housing, the waiting list can be 10 years, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about the Housing Authority, and we just have a few minutes, there have been a lot of revelations about how poorly NYCHA is run. Highly paid board members, I think they got rid of a few of those. Residents who have to wait years for just basic repairs. The authority had let millions of dollars in federal money designated for security cameras sit idle for years. Why hasn't Bloomberg fired the chairman of NYCHA?
I can't answer that, but I do think it's NYCHA, Bloomberg's lack of attention to NYCHA is a real challenge. I mean, NYCHA is a big housing development. It's as big in terms of units and people as some major cities in the U.S. and rivals, I think, the size of Boston. It's a lot of housing that people don't think about.
But for years, New York had a reputation of having some of the best maintained public housing projects, a lot more stable than those in Chicago or St. Louis that got blown up because they were so bad. But now it just seems to be going downhill in terms of management.
But I think it's part of whether or not NYCHA is viewed and public housing tenants are viewed as a part of the city and a part of the community. And if they're city residents like everyone else, then the mayor, the leadership will I know it's a challenge because NYCHA's fiscal challenges are huge and are enormous, and the federal government is not going to come in and solve them, and we are going to have to solve them in New York City and New York State ourselves. But it has to start from the leadership saying, this is a part of the city, this is a part of our communities, we care about these residents, and we're gonna try to address this, and we're gonna work on it.
So in the minute we have left, generally run down what you want the next mayor to do in terms of the affordable housing issue.
I would say commit to a guaranteed inclusionary zoning so that we get affordable units as the city grows and as we see development across the city. Real affordability, so we really look at whether or not units are affordable for the local community and for the residents there. Permanently affordable, so that we don't have to worry about things expiring and we're investing in something that's going to be there in the future. And really going back and committing to CDCs and local development who invest in their community and who have led this work really since the beginning.
Well, I hope whoever is going to be the next mayor of New York was listening to you. We're out of time. My thanks to Barika Williams, Policy Director of the Association of Neighborhood and Housing Development, for joining me today. If you'd like more information, you can go to their website at ANHD.org. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.